Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and neutral. I'm going to quote from former President Lyndon Johnson when he was going to make one of his speeches designed to really touch the heartstrings of Americans. I come before you today with a heavy heart. Now, I don't even know if he had a heart, so to speak. I don't have a heavy heart in the way that most people mean it, but little children mean a great deal to me. And for those who love Jesus or pretend to, he loved these little children. The little children were around him, and the adults, even among his disciples, were saying, "Turn them away, you're too busy." And then Jesus stopped all of that. He picked up a child and said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." And on another occasion, "Unless ye shall become as little children, you shall in no wise enter the kingdom of heaven." And then the awesome, awe-inspiring, awful warning. "Any man who offends against one of these my little ones, it were better for him that a millstone be hanged around his neck and he be drowned in the depth of the sea." Yet with all of this talk of Christianity and religion, Congress, every legislature in the country will have a prayer. And yet when the little children whom Jesus made clear he loved are being slaughtered in the classrooms with these weapons made for the battlefield, these white people in power, some of them who call themselves pro-life, and they want to take away a woman's right to have an abortion because they say a fetus is a human being. Yet when the little children who are fully formed as human beings, and there's no question about them being human beings, not a developmental stage. And by that I mean, an acorn is not an oak tree. The eggs, when you go to the restaurant, are not chicken. You ask for a fried egg, not a fried chicken. So an acorn is not an oak tree. A fetus is not a human being. A fetus is in a developmental stage which will result in a human being. But there is so much political advantage, so much political hay to be made to prevent women from having an abortion, that more is done by these politicians and the US Supreme Court to ensure that a fetus survives. Some say soon as the egg is fertilized, that's a human being. Not so. It is a formative stage. These children who are fully developed, they're going to school, are being mowed down with military style weapons. These so-called pro-life people don't utter a whimper. All of these politicians, all these hypocrites who want to take away a woman's right to have an abortion, pretending they care so much about what they call an unborn baby, will let you know that that might be true there, but once that is born, they don't care. There are a few senators, even among the Republicans, who are trying to find something that can be done to regulate these guns. The craziest statement made is, "Guns don't kill people, people kill people." All right, lay 10 machine guns across this table and I put my hands down. I'm a person. Then I pull the trigger. Why did those people die? Because of the gun. Look, I'm doing this. Nobody's going to die. I can do this and nobody will die. The knife kills, the gun kills. without these guns that shoot a lot of bullets and kill a lot of people very quickly, they're being sold. And people will not look at the fact that the gun industry, the firearms industry, is a multi-billion-dollar operation. One of the Bushes, a politician, through and from stem to stern, pushed through a protection for the gun manufacturers so that they cannot be held responsible for the guns and what they do, but as a kind of a bone you throw, it depends on their advertising. If they advertise their guns in a way that would indicate they're designed to kill people, and one of their guns is used for that purpose, a person may be able to recover. In one of the New England states, where it might be Smith and Wesson, one of those manufacturers of guns is operating, they got a huge judgment against the gun manufacturer because the guns were advertised along the lines of how many people could be killed, how quickly they could be killed, how a man gets his gonads when he gets this particular gun. It was clear that the advertising was designed to attract people to buy these guns for the damage they can do for human beings. If Bambi is out there, what would anybody think if a person went out there with an AR-15 and sprayed and killed Bambi and Bambi's mama and daddy? These guns are not for hunting. These guns are for slaughtering human beings. That's why the military version was created, to kill a lot of people quickly. Rather than go through all of that or rehearse the horrendous feelings of regret, sorrow, and loss that befall those whose children are killed, whose children of their friends are killed, or the doubly tragic situation where in this latest killing in Texas, a child was killed, the father died from something or other, and then the mother had a heart attack, but the child and the two parents were victims of that killing. That white boy planned it. He had on the armor that turned aside the bullets that were fired by the security guard that would have stopped him. And he killed the security guard in one of the shootings, the one in Buffalo, I believe. So the weaponry, the equipment are designed to kill people in a so-called Christian nation. That's why I have nothing and no use for their religion. Their talk of freedom, justice, and equality is BS. This is one of the most hateful, murderous, bloodthirsty countries on the face of the earth. No country anywhere on this earth has regular killings of school children in the classroom. It doesn't happen anywhere. Not in China, not in Russia, not in Afghanistan. Now, you might have some children killed in Afghanistan as a result of missiles and bombs dropped by the Americans and so-called allies. The Ukrainians are receiving a lot of sympathy because their homes are being destroyed, their children are being killed, their religious sites and everything is a target for the Russians. But that holds true when it comes to the way the Israelis are dealing with the Palestinians. They stole the Palestinians' land with the help of the United States. They are building what are called settlements on Palestinian territory, and the military, the Israeli military, are there to ensure that the Palestinians don't fight to hold their land. Their homes are taken, confiscated, and given over to Jewish families. There was a reporter with Al Jazeera, doing her job of covering some of what is being done to the Palestinians by the Jews at various locations, and she was shot dead. She was not a menace. Investigations were undertaken. The bullet finally was turned over by the Palestinian, the PLO, and they just determined that this bullet removed from this woman's body was fired by an Israeli soldier. She's unarmed. She's not a combatant. She was shot down. Where is all the outcry about that as there is for the white people in Ukraine? What some people don't know is about the hatred that Ukrainians have for Black people. When those trains were leaving Ukraine, the Africans who went there as students to go to medical school, and they were made to feel that they were welcome, they were physically thrown off the train. Some were physically assaulted. Some were told, get out and don't ever come back. So the white racism was manifesting itself. But at the same time, the Ukrainians were talking about how badly they were being treated. You need to study history. People talk about the Holocaust. When Jews were rounded up, put on cattle cars, taken to death camps, gassed in gas chambers. Before that, they were lined up in trenches, along trenches, get on their knees, and an SS Schutzstaffel would come along and shoot them in the back of the head, and they'd fall into the trench. And some of them, when the dirt was put over them in the mass grave, were not dead at the time the dirt was put over them. Well, they felt that that was creating such a bad impression around the world, they had to find a different way. So they got these vans and they were hermetically sealed. That means no air could get in, no air could get out, airtight. And they would put the Jews in the back of these vans and they would run the exhaust pipe from the engine right into the back of that van. And by the time they took the Jews to where they were supposed to be, all of them were dead. And when you die in that fashion, you lose control of your bowels and your bladder. There was urine, feces, a horrible stench, people's face distorted, the look of horror on their face. Then they stopped doing that. Was it because they felt sympathy? No, because the SS soldiers, as they were called, who had to open those doors and unload these victims, were so sickened by what they saw and smelled that they stopped using these vans. Not because of the victims who were dying because of it, but the SS who were sickened by what they saw. So then they converted some of these large buildings into what could be made to look like showers. They even had shower heads, false ones, along the walls near the top. And they would tell the Jews that because some of you are unclean and you bring vermin with you, you have to take a shower, and then you're going to be given these uniforms and you're going to be taken to detention. Well, actually, there was a substance known as Zyklon B, a gas made by one of the large German industrialists who is still in operation now. They would tell the Jews that they're going to have to take off their clothes. So they'd have the women put their blouses here. In other words, the victims had to put their clothes with like clothes, so that piles of trousers, piles of blouses, piles of skirts, shoes. And they said, in order that your shoes won't get lost, tie the shoelaces together so the shoes are paired. Everything made. The Germans were master technicians. So when the Jews would be herded into these gas chambers, male and female, stark naked, then the gas would be brought in. Not all of them would be dead before they were put into the crematoria, the large furnaces. They had these huge smokestacks over the crematoriums so that the odors and ashes would go up and be scattered, and the odors sometimes would be palpable to the people. They could smell them, in other words, in surrounding areas, and they knew that when they saw that glow from the smokestack and the huge billowing smoke, that Jews, dead and alive, were being burned. Well, they needed guards in these camps. And guess who some of the guards were? The Ukrainians. Ukrainians served as guards in the extermination camps. So before you all start listening to these notions about different white groups being oppressed in other places, learn something about their history and the attitudes that they have even now. But despite what I know from reading history, the horrible things the Ukrainians assisted the Nazis in doing to the Jews, I still do not think that the innocent should suffer for the guilty. Not all Ukrainians worked as guards in the death camps, but there's no way to separate which ones did and which ones didn't if you didn't actually know. Not all Germans were Nazis. Not all Nazis were SS, the Schutzstaffel. Not all Germans who were Nazis were members of the Gestapo, the German secret state police. But they're all painted with one brush. If people would study history, they would have a much clearer picture of what happened and why there are some of the antagonisms in Europe between and among all of them white, all of them Europeans, but they have differing philosophies and beliefs, and they kill each other. And America ran over there because white people were killing white people. And when black men were put in the army, they were discriminated against. They were in segregated units. And Churchill, after years had passed, had various secret documents in his archives, and these things were open to scholars. And it contained these large releases, the minutes of various meetings that they had when Churchill talked to his cabinet. And he talked about how the Americans discriminated against black troops, how they segregated their troops. But he wanted every person in the British Army to know that what Americans did to black so-called Americans would not be tolerated by the white Brits who commanded soldiers who also were black because they came from the islands. There would be no segregation or discrimination against the black people in the British Army in the way that it was by Americans who yelped about freedom, justice, and equality and Constitution and so forth, the way they discriminated against black troops who were over in a white country fighting for white people, against white people, yet discriminated against, not only in the country where they lived and their families lived, but by the commanders. And the French had an award, the Croix de Guerre, the War Cross, Military Cross, and the black men were heroic in almost every engagement. There was a detachment, 339th or something, I don't remember, 69, but anyway, they spent more months without a break on the front lines than any other detachment of American soldiers. And when the French recognized it and wanted to give them the Croix de Guerre, the commander of the American forces went to the French general officers and said, "Do not give that award to any Black soldier because we do not treat them that way in America. They'll get heirs and be beside themselves. So French people saw more worth in Black troops than Americans. These kind of things are coming out now. Some people in Omaha may be aware of this Black man. His last name is French. I went to school with some of his kids or relatives. We were all kids together. We didn't know about him, but the Japanese had sunk one of the ships that the Americans were on. And this Black man, 15 white men in a raft, 15, 5, 10, 15 in a raft, and he swam in the ocean for hours, literally, and saved their lives. Was there a Congressional Medal of Honor? No. Was there any medal? No. Well, what did he get? He got a letter on paper of commendation. I was reading where down through the years, the white soldiers that had been rescued were petitioning presidents and Congress to recognize what this man had did. By the way, he died when he was 36 years old. And this country would not do it. And then they want to say, don't teach critical race theory in the schools because their misunderstanding of it. It's not taught in grade school, high school, and not in some universities. It's an upper level course of academic study because it makes white people feel guilty. It makes their children feel bad when they find out what white people have done to other groups. So don't teach that. That's what we have to deal with even today. Then, without taking all my time on that, all of this sympathy for the Ukrainians. There was some soccer team that won a trophy and they sold it for, I think, $90,000, maybe $900,000, and gave all that money to the Ukrainians. Biden said he's going to give them mid-range weaponry. We would think of them as in terms of rockets. To date, America has given the Ukrainians $4 billion of military aid, $4 billion. And you have a white racist governor, spoiled brat of a rich man, who would not accept money from the government to subsidize people who couldn't pay their rent. Americans, white people, by and large, can't pay their rent. And all he identified with in that case, not with white people, because more white people had problems with rent than we, because there are 10 times as many of them as us. But not only did he refuse, but when the legislature passed a bill to force him to do it, he said he'd veto it. And he really didn't have to, because he can keep a bill and either pass, sign it, or veto it for 10 days. And if he doesn't sign it, then it becomes law without a signature. But he knew that before the 10 days ran out, the deadline for accepting this money to subsidize rent for people who are losing their places to stay and they have children, that deadline would be passed. So the governor got a victory. And it wasn't money that was coming out of the state's pocket. It was bringing money into the state. But you know what that governor said? It will make people lazy. It will make them dependent. They will look for handouts. Now he's talking about poor people who can't pay their rent, of all races, all religions, all different national origins, make them lazy. Yet his daddy, Joe Ricketts, who established TD Ameritrade, got taxpayer money from Omaha to build his headquarters in Omaha, $3 to $5 or $7 million in Omahans' tax money to underwrite him building that building. had areas where white people live declared blighted and substandard, and they were outraged. But this is what a white rich man wanted, and he got it. Then after he built it, got all that tax money, he sold it to Charles Schwab for 26 billion with a B, $26 billion. That's what white men do. And Ricketts is his son. Ricketts has a brother, Joe Ricketts' son, in Chicago, who got a whole lot of heat for cheating on his property taxes. He lied about the size of a home that he had built, and he hadn't paid the amount on a smaller home, but which was bigger than anybody else had. And he lied and used the home, the small one, to say he was having to pay more property tax than he should have, and he wasn't even paying what he should on that. But the scoundrel used that as a mansion that he had built, the new one, and saying that that was too much in property tax he had to pay. Crooked. But these crooks stick together. And now I have to talk about what we as Black people do to each other. When people are lumped together and they are impoverished, psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health care providers of all stripes know that when you put a lot of any of the same species in too small a space, then all, if they are social in nature, all of those restrictions break down and they begin to attack each other. They learned this by studying various social animals. They give them not enough territory, so each one didn't have enough space, and they did with monkeys. They even did it with some of the lower forms of life, as they're called. And rather than getting along and respecting each other and having this social structure, they began to attack each other. It became clear that when people did not have enough space, then the societal restraints and restrictions would break down and they would attack each other. So when you jam a lot of people into a small area, crimes are committed against each other. And the ones who are putting them in this enforced togetherness, so to speak, use what is happening that they created to show that these people are more inclined toward violence. Look what they do to each other. But whether people are ghettoized or not, people commit crimes, more crimes against those of their own kind than they do anybody else. White people commit more crimes against white people than they do against anybody else. Italians, Native Americans, whoever people who are of a mind to kill somebody is going to kill is somebody of his own kind because you live around your own kind. So all that can be thrown out the window. But that doesn't excuse us. We have to do something about the violence, the killings perpetrated by us against each other. It happens in ghettos all over America, and it's misused by people who know better to say that Black people are by nature violent. If we were by nature violent, we would be doing to white people what they've done to us. And what they fear is that someday we may wake up to how many bad things they've done to us and begin to retaliate in kind. If a Black person does something to white people, by and large, it's a reaction to what a white person has done. You all have seen examples where, thanks to these telephones that can be used to record, white women have accused Black people of attacking them when that was not the case. One white woman said this Black kid in a hotel stole her tablet, and it turned out not to be the case. Hers, she had left in a cab, it was given to her. She called the police on this kid. He was mishandled in the hotel. Some Black men came to a Starbucks and sat at a table talking to each other like white people, and the management called the police. And they hadn't done anything except be Black and sit down at a table. And Starbucks shut down to give them some training in what they call implicit violence, racism, meaning you're not aware of it. You're racist, but you don't know it. Well, these white people know what racism is, and they know racist, because white people have been clustering at tables without buying anything all the time. They gather at a Starbucks to talk. They know, and when it's all directed against Black people, it's racism. Whenever you have a collection of bad things happening, originating at one source, moving in one direction against the same designated people, that is not by accident, that is not coincidence, that is not happenstance, that is deliberate and intentional. So in all of these discriminatory actions, this violence by the police, all these things are against our people. The setting of police dogs on Black children. What do you think white people would say if Black people set police dogs on white children in the way it was on ours? If white women and young women and older women had fire hoses that are used to put out blazes in buildings, had those hoses turned on them, and they were literally sent rolling down the street. What do you think would be said if Black people did that to white people? Some Black firefighters went crazy and turned it on some white women who were walking down the street. You know what would be said, but it was shown on television day after day, evening after evening, happening to us, our old women, our young children, yes, even infants. And white people watched it, all being done by white people against Black people. And we're the ones they want to say are racist in reverse. When Black people do something against white people, it's as a reaction to what they've done to us first. And what they fear is someday we'll wake up and do what they would do if they were situated in the way that we are. And I used to always put it like this: we'll sing, we shall overcome, and use prayer books to fight against white people based on what they're doing to us. When you arm your soldiers with prayer books when they land on the beach to fight the enemy, and they're accompanied by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir singing the Hallelujah chorus, people get a kick out of that, but they want us to sing, we shall overcome, when we're getting our heads busted, our women are being molested and killed by the police, our children are being beaten in the schools, literally, by white people. And they say we're racist in reverse. Well, if we're racist in reverse, that means we're non-racist. They know that we're being provoked, but it's either superhuman, super silliness, or super brainwashing. We do not respond in kind to what they do to us. Suppose every time the Ku Klux Klan hanged a Black man, a white man was hanged. Oh, and they ravished Black women. You can read papers today. Even one of the so-called royal families was involved in the trafficking of young white girls. And you mean to tell me when they are willing to risk going to prison for decades to ravish these young white girls, when they can, quote, own these beautiful Black women, they're not going to ravish and rape them? These white people know what they're doing when they say certain things won't be taught in the schools. And one reason is because the children will read things in the school books that were done to Black children and Black women. And they'll know that, why, those are the very things happening in our family. I've got a brother who's having sex with his sister. My daddy's having sex with his daughter. That's what they're concerned about. And we go along with the program. The mayor of Omaha has a habit of recycling Black men who have sold out this community. One loses a position here because he won't be elected, and she'll give him a job on some committee or council, and he'll be paid. One who was a complete flop as chief of police, a complete flop. The police union wrote articles ridiculing him, talking about him like he had a tail. And he didn't do anything about it. And he gets a job in the mayor's office. She surrounds herself with these colored, what do they call them? House Negroes. Check them out. What have they ever done to benefit this community? Now, I don't have anything against Ewing. Alex Ewing used to come to the shop and we got along famously. But when he ran for the treasurer's position, he never let his picture be shown. And white unions supported him. And a lot of white people were shocked when they found out it was a black man because they wouldn't have voted for him. That's the way white people do. And some of us go along with the program. I don't know how much time I have left, but I've got something I'm going to try to read. And if I go over my time, then we'll just see what's done. This was written and it appeared in the Omaha Star, April 24th, 2008. This is 2022. How much is 22 minus 8? 8 from 2, or you can say 12, is 4. You carry that 1 over here to subtract it from this other 2 of the 22, and you get 12. A dozen years ago, brothers, there are too many of you dying, in the Omaha Star. I know good and well that rhymes ought not be submitted to a newspaper. Due to the narrow width of columns, the breaking up of lines often is necessitated, and leftover words must go on the following line. Though well aware of such built-in limitations, I grit my teeth, assume the risk, and make such submissions as I'm doing again now. Most of the time, no harm results. Other times, alas, the rhyme scheme and rhythm are disrupted. Lines may be omitted. Misprints occur, which lead to some, shall I say, interesting, puzzling, and even nonsensical statements. As I've acknowledged by way of a quotation from one of my favorite writers, Oscar Wilde, a poet can survive anything but a misprint. And I suffered from misprints. So here I go again, twice. Why do I do it? Because for one thing, more can be said with fewer words and without a lot of developmental background or leading up to in a poem. And sometimes a rhyme will be read when prose will not be. Usually I don't explain a rhyme, but this time due to logistical problems, I have to. A conversation is involved between two speakers on a regular sized sheet of paper. Separation of the speakers is done by simply indenting all of the comments of one of them, and no quotation marks need to be employed. Here it is different. Although the manner of speech may make clear which of them is speaking, I don't want to leave it to chance. The comments of only one of them will be enclosed within quotation marks with teeth gritted. Here I go. Inner city point, counterpoint. Blue-eyed devil, racist dog, how I hate and abhor him. Why then kill your brother, my brother, doing the devil's work for him? Look around this ghetto, man, the blue-eyed devil's cursed. Though your words ring true, my brother, killing makes things worse. I don't have no future, man. I mean, there ain't no hope. Not as long as men like you serve death with guns and dope. I don't manufacture dope and I don't make no gun. True, but if the porters quit, the death train cannot run. If I throw away the gun and dope, what's left for me? We can work, my brother, to rebuild our family. If I quit, the others won't, and I don't want to die. We don't know what we can do, my brother, till we try. Long ago, I used to think my life might turn out good. Now I ain't so sure, although I've done the best I could. Little kids are told this stuff. and think it all is true. When you're little, you believe there's nothing you can't do. Bad stuff starts to happen, man. Those teachings fade to gray. Then, like me, you're in a net and you can't get away. For a minute there, you made me think I might could win. Then that net starts drawing tight and choking me again. People ain't in these streets, don't know how cold they are. Ain't no way to break this net. I'm in it way too far. I ain't got no education. I can't hardly read. Everything is moving fast and I ain't got no speed. Maybe I feel shame sometimes and maybe even sorrow. Maybe I just want to know I'll be alive tomorrow. I've been in these streets too long, man. Life for me is hard. Nothing's out here for me but some grave or prison yard. Man, you've been here talking. Are you doing it for my sake? Ain't nobody never in this life gave me no break. What you said I'll think about, man. Maybe it'd be true. Unless I try, I guess I'll never know what I can do. You might think I'm jiving, but I'll take your words to heart. Maybe if you'll try and help me, I can make a start. Maybe I can shake the dope and throw away the gun. Like you say, that death train's got to have my help to run. You, my brother, have my word. I'll help you win this fight. Years it took to get this way, it won't change overnight. See this as a giant tree with deep roots standing tall. If we use our axes right, the tree has got to fall. Not far down the street, a lightless car crept into view. Run, man, get away, he yelled. It's me they want, not you. Tires squealed, the car bore down. Its brights lit up the pair. Shots erupted, acrid stench of gun smoke fouled the air. Prostrate on the sidewalk bled two men no longer living. Death did reap another crop in mean streets unforgiving. One a soul who'd lost his way, the other trying to save him. Death, no respecter of persons, struck the same fate he gave to them. Thunder rolled and frayed-edged lightning flashed. The tears of rain washed away the still warm blood, but not the death and pain. Soon the news of death would spread, a neighborhood would cry, then in anguish ask, oh Lord, how many more must die? That's that one. Big Mr. Muffet. As children, most of us heard the nursery rhyme, Little Miss Muffet, about a girl who was frightened away by a spider as she ate her curds and whey. With that bit of information, the title might be understood. Big Mr. Muffet. Junkies, dopers, hobheads, addicts, makes no difference what the name. All are hooked on demon drugs they played and lost the devil's game. Some are launched on pills and sprays while others soar on crack. Methamphetamine or heroin, most can't make it back. Squashing them gives cops their kick. Those cops who sly logistics aim at headlines, not to help. They love those drug statistics. See how quickly do they bite those drug-fogged floundering fish? Some in nets are wrapped up tight. The venal lazy cops wish. Trapping victims of the scourge is law enforcement's vice. Locking them in iron cages makes them victims twice. Big importers, big time dealers, fear not cops nor law. Money buys immunity, corruption in the raw. They be swollen spiders spinning webs to snare the weak. Every strand a petty pusher, vulnerable ones they seek. One who would exterminate all webs from the jam and seal does not simply sweep the webs, instead the spiders kill. Where is the true power? Unlike Hillary Clinton, I never have and never will downplay the power of words. Even during shooting wars, words are a very potent weapon, as demonstrated by both sides during the Vietnam War. Hearts and minds, as they say, must be won, even as bodies are being mangled and destroyed by bullets, bombs, napalm, grenades, and rockets. And while the troops, insurgents, rebels, resistance, or what have you, wage bloody combat, words are continually being utilized at the ambassadorial level in an attempt to end the shooting and killing. Can an accord be reached? You see, a condition of war cannot last forever. Thus, the sides have little choice other than to talk to each other. The governor and I recognize this fact. There was a man in his office, he and I would talk, even though the governor and I were not on speaking terms. For those who pretend to believe the Holly Bible, for those who believe or pretend to believe the Holly Bible's counsel, they will find these words. A word spoken in due season, how good is it? That's Proverbs 15:23. This refers to appropriate words spoken at an appropriate time. True words, whether in prose or poetry, have a vital role to play, and proper quality education, as well as constant reading, is the foundation of good word usage and power. The ammunition of that loaded brain is words. And I've often said a loaded brain is more powerful than a loaded gun, unless you're in a gunfight. Finally, Jesus reputedly proclaimed regarding himself, I am the Word. These things that I wrote about and even write about now comprise my beliefs, my wishes, and they say, if wishes were horses, then beggars would ride. And I say, if wishes were meat, the hungry would eat. Wishes in and of themselves will not gain anything. But if you follow my formula of CBA rather than ABC, conceive it, believe it, achieve it. You first have to have that vision, believe in it, then bend your efforts and put forth the effort to bring that into reality. We have children, and I'm going to turn a corner here slightly, who are disheartened, they're confused, they're lost. They suffer anxiety, their mind is in a turmoil. Some of them go to what I call the gadget, and they get lost in this world of social media where every manner of insanity, perversion, disinformation, misinformation can be found. Young people do not have an experiential background or a background of experiences that will help them make judgments about what they're facing. Some may be facing a problem for the first time in their life. With some experience, they might know they could brush it aside. It's not going to last forever, but without that background, it looms large. If I have a light here and I put a small object close to it, then it throws a very large shadow that might cover that wall. But if the bright light is here and my finger's there, then it makes a small shadow on the wall, and you can deal with that. It's not Dracula. It's not Frankenstein. It's not the Wolf Man. It's just the shadow of a finger. But if you are a young child and you have not experienced certain things, you don't have a measuring rod, then that which would make an adult laugh, that which might make a teenager just kind of shake his or her head, to a youngster, it's the Wolf Man, it's Frankenstein, is Dracula all rolled into one. There are young children who do things that result in self-killing, not starting out with that intention, but they don't understand the consequences of their actions. When they get a little older, they understand what killing is. They don't totally understand what dying is. Almost is the notion that when you die, you still are aware of what's happening here, and you can see what people think, how they feel, how they react, the regret they have when you take your life. But that's not going to happen. When you die, you cease to be. You're not going to be aware of anything. The Bible even said, the dead know nothing. But when there is so much that confuses young people, that leads them astray, even in the classrooms, they're not given a sound education. What are they to do? What can they do? Only that which those who are not taught to swim will do when they're thrown in deep water. They thrash about, they kick, they do the very things that will make them sink quicker, and they drown. So when we have young people drowning in the waters of life that they don't understand, we should not make it worse by criticizing them, condemning them, when what they need is somebody to put an arm around the shoulder and comforting them. I'm your big brother. I'm here for you if nobody else is. You can tell me whatever you want to tell me. And if you don't want to say anything, let's just be here. And you know that I'm here. When you want to talk, we will. And then you might can start a conversation to lift the person out of that mood, but at least the person doesn't feel totally alone. I'm telescoping things and putting a lot into a small space. These things take time to develop. There are others who've been abused by the ones they ought to be able to trust. The priest, sometimes even a parent. Sometimes brothers rape their sisters. Sometimes sisters seduce their brothers. Bad things happen because people lose their way. They have no compass. There's nobody there to show them their way. And often when a child needs help, the one whom that child should be able to trust is the one who will take greater advantage of them when the child comes, because these predators recognize vulnerability. Just as a cat who hunts mice for a living knows the ways of mice when mice don't know the ways of a cat. A cat knows that if I'm chasing a mouse over there, that mouse is going to follow the baseboard. But the mouse doesn't know that I, as a cat, may start him running over there. But instead of me running behind him, I run, as they call, cat a corner. And when he goes to that wall and comes this way and gets to this wall, I'm sitting there with my mouth open, and he wonders how I got there ahead of him. Well, I know more about the mouse than the mouse knows about me. We have to learn how to look out for each other and take care of each other. During the time of the so-called demonstrations that white people call riots, they were not riots. They were not destruction of people's neighborhoods. They were destructions of the capitalist predators who'd set up establishments. They sell old produce, tainted meat for more than what it's worth. So when you find a way to hit your enemy, you hit him. But even there, the blue-eyed devil had the upper hand. In the old days, these buildings would be built abutting each other, and the one wall between these two establishments was a common wall for both of them. So you might be very angry at this Jew or this white person who's been cheating your family and you, talking bad to the little children, set him afire. But the white firefighters know if the white man or the Jewish person's place is going to burn down, the black person's place next to it is going to burn down too. That was not set fire directly by the ones who are taking revenge, but the white firefighters are going to make sure that all of the black places burn down. But during those times, black people listened to Muslims under the one called the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Louis Farrakhan, whose last name was Walcott originally. These people talked about being Black. Your name is a slave name. There are no Chamberses in Africa, no Goodwins in Africa, no Bradfords in Africa. None of those names that we as Black people have will be found in Africa. White people hung their names on us, sometimes ridiculing us. So they said, you've got to get rid of your slave name. But since you don't know your real name, because they took from you your religion, your culture, your society, all of your traditions and education taken from you, X stands for that which is unknown. So instead of Malcolm Little, you now are Malcolm X. So Muslims took X as a substitute for their slave name. If there were two people with the same first name, whichever one first converted to Islam would be Louis X. The second one, Louis 2X, 3X, or however many there were. The number of X's would indicate the order in which he converted. He said, drop that word Negro. That's a slave designation. It was hung on you during a time when you were owned as property like a pig, cow, or chicken. When they sold you in the marketplace, they call it the auction block, and where they come up and strip a Black woman naked. And not only could they part her lips and look at her teeth, they could feel her breasts. They could grope her vagina. They could squeeze her buttocks. Yeah, this is what white men did in the open, in front of white children. And white women saw it and they didn't like it, but they better not say anything. Excuse me. So Negro was the name accepted by those Black people who did not know their origin or were ashamed of it. Black was what the Muslim used as a designation for those of African descent. The Muslim communities would protect their members. Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X was one of the trainers, had what was called the Fruit of Islam, the FOI. They were like bodyguards or security. They were taught how to handle dogs, police dogs, and they were so competent in the martial arts that police feared them more when they had no gun than they did the Negro with the slave name who had a gun. But at any rate, the Muslims began to have an impact in the community. They had their restaurants. Naturally, they had their different mosques. They had the respect for Black women, for each other. And there were some hypocrites who called themselves Muslims, as has been in every religion. But if one was found out, he was in a world of hurting and trouble. And that's why some of them would disappear, not with their feet in cement or because they were taken out and blown away in some cornfield. They disappeared because they took off like Superman without being in an airplane. They knew it was time to cut a trail and leave no scent for the bloodhounds. But anyway, they developed their own community, and white people became fearful. And the way that they could frighten us as Black people away from other Black people is to say they're violent, which Muslims were not toward other Black people. They would defend themselves. They believed in self-defense, but not aggression, not initiators of violence. But if in the early days you were going to attack a Muslim group, you needed to know what it was you were dealing with. But at any rate, they began to have that impact. Black men, clean yourself up. Take care of your community. What little you have, make the most of it. Don't fight each other. Get rid of the alcohol. Stop eating that hog. Do away with the liquor. Don't overeat. The kind of things that were as valuable from the health standpoint, meaning diet and so forth, as when it had a religious significance given to it. Pretty soon, Black people were not attacking Black people as much as currently had been going on. Then the so-called civil rights struggle broke out, and it started with some young Black people and Black women. Black women were always the backbone of what Black men did. And I'm leaving a lot out to make a point. When the demonstrations began and there were the marches, Black people began to see that we had been our own worst enemies because we did the devil's work for him. So now we're not going to do that work foolishly for him. We're going to consolidate our interest and energy in our own community. But there were still gangs, there were still Black people who try to take advantage of Black people, but there were those in the community who would deal with them. You didn't have drug dealers openly on the corner, like the song said, junk man standing on the corner, selling death, no conscience has he. In the name of God, won't somebody stop him? That's a song sung by the Temptations, if you want to hear a good song. Junk man standing on the corner. And then it describes him, desperate with no sense of values, just an evil mind lurking in the night. Because of you, these streets ain't safe for walking, because you're feeling so uptight. Even the Temptations were singing about it. James Brown singing, I'm black and I'm proud. Well, James Brown was black and loud, but he hadn't understood the pride aspect of it. But to get back to the main point, the crime of black on black, as it was called, began to diminish. It had reached almost what the artist called the vanishing point. When you want to create perspective and you're drawing a picture, you put a dot on the piece of paper, and then anything that you put in the foreground that's close to a person, you go from that corner down to that dot and down to that dot. That's the vanishing point. Then you cut it off wherever you want that building to show. But if you look at it from that standpoint, you see that both sides of that building are going to that vanishing point, and that's the little dot. Crime, black against black, began to diminish to the vanishing point, and this alarmed white people more than the marches and the other things that were done to try to fight against the segregation and discrimination. We had been the ones who kept each other in check. When our eyes began to open, our minds were informed. We began to think logically and rationally that I do not help myself get strong by weakening my brother. We both do better when we combine our efforts and do twice as much together as either one of us could do alone. And the twice as much together gives each of us more than each of us would have gotten alone. It's not thought of in those terms necessarily or analyzed in that way, but you perceive things and you grasp them as you begin to experience them. That's why they say experience is the best teacher. And then they add, and some will have no other. At any rate, we've reached the point again where we have black youngsters killing other black youngsters, and other people are being caught in the crossfire. And my plea, if you want to call it that, to the authorities is that they go to the source of the illegal guns and catch those people. They know who the suppliers are, because as soon as they do something against a white person, they know right who to go to and snatch up. But as long as we do bad things to each other, we have carte blanche and can do what we please. Now, I don't want to go forever, so I am going to bring this to a halt and end it as I always do. As said the canary, who became aware that the cage door was ajar, I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to make suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This has been an EWC Communication production.